The harsh Arizona sun beat down on the Apache village nestled between ancient red rock formations. Chief Nakohe, respected warrior and guardian of his people, sought solitude by the sacred river when he discovered her. A young white woman with tears streaming down her dirt-stained face. Her dress was torn, her spirit nearly broken. Cast out by her own family, she had nothing left but the clothes on her back and a fierce determination to survive. Despite generations of bloodshed between their peoples, something in her eyes spoke to him. A warrior's resolve beneath her fragile exterior. Could an Apache chief and a disowned white woman find common ground in a land torn apart by prejudice and violence? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Chief Nakohe stood on the flat rock overlooking his village as the first light of dawn broke over the eastern mountains. The eagle feather headdress, symbol of his leadership, rested beside him rather than upon his head. In these private moments, he was simply a man seeking guidance. The weight of responsibility had etched deep lines around his eyes despite being only 45 summers. His people, the NDE, those the white men called Apache, faced challenges unlike any in their history. Not just the usual threats of drought or rival tribes, but the relentless advance of those who seemed determined to claim every inch of their ancestral lands. He ran weathered fingers over the scars on his forearm, marks of battles won and lost. The worst scars, though, remained invisible. 8 winters had passed since smallpox had claimed his wife Natika and their son. The emptiness never truly healed, merely scabbed over like a wound that refused proper mending. Nakohe, a voice called from below. The council awaits. He nodded to Dakota, his most trusted warrior. I come. The tribal council gathered in the central lodge. 8 elders whose combined wisdom had guided the tribe through countless seasons sat in a semicircle. Opposing them sat the younger warriors, among them Kichi, whose dark eyes burned with barely concealed frustration. The white settlers have established another camp, Dakota reported. 3 days' ride to the west. They search for gold in the sacred mountains. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Kichi rose to his feet. How long before we fight? They take more land each moon while we talk. Elder Makia raised his hand for silence. And what would you have us do, young one? Rush into battle against their guns? Our people have already seen too much death. Nakohe studied the faces around him. The divide between old and young grew wider with each passing season. The elders counseled patience, accommodation. The warriors hungered for action, resistance. We will continue to watch, Nakohe decided. But we will also prepare. The winter comes soon. The settlers may retreat to their larger settlements when snow blankets the mountains. Kichi's jaw tightened, but he offered no further challenge. When the council disbanded, Nakohe retreated to his private ritual. Each day since losing his family, he had visited the sacred river where the ancestor spirits were said to gather. There, he would place a small offering of tobacco and seek the wisdom that often eluded him among his people. The river's gentle murmur soothed his troubled thoughts. Here, he could admit the doubts he must never show before the tribe. Were they truly following the right path? Would patience lead to peace or merely a slower extinction? The questions haunted him like persistent shadows. He had just placed his offering upon the water when an unfamiliar sound caught his attention. A sound that did not belong to the natural rhythm of the forest. A soft, broken sob, moving with the silent grace that had made him a feared warrior in his youth. Nakohe followed the sound around a bend in the river. There, huddled against a boulder, her pale face streaked with dirt and tears, sat a white woman. Her clothing, once fine by their standards, hung in tatters. Blood had dried on her forearms where branches had scraped the skin raw. But it was her eyes that captured his attention. Despite her obvious distress, they held a defiance that spoke of strength not yet broken. For a moment, neither moved. The woman froze like a deer sensing a predator. Nakohe remained still, understanding that any sudden movement might send her fleeing into the wilderness. In the space between heartbeats, Nakohe made a decision that would alter the course of many lives. Instead of retreating or advancing, He slowly lowered himself to a crouch, making his formidable presence less threatening. "You are hurt," he said in the broken English he had learned through occasional trading. He gestured to the river. "Water. Drink." Eleanor Bennett flinched at the Apache chief's extended hand, expecting violence rather than compassion. 3 days alone in the wilderness had taught her to fear everything: the scorching sun, the night's bitter cold, the strange sounds that echoed through the canyon. "Water," the man repeated, gesturing again to the river. Her cracked lips and parched throat overruled her fear. Cautiously, she crept forward on hands and knees, keeping a wary eye on the imposing figure as she cupped trembling hands into the cool stream. The water's sweet relief brought involuntary tears. In her satchel lay the only possession she had managed to salvage: a half-burned photograph showing Eleanor standing proudly beside her father, her mother seated in front. The elegant Boston parlor behind them might as well have been another world now. The edges were charred where William had thrown it into the fire before she rescued it during her escape. "You are alone," the chief observed, his deep voice startling her from her memories. Eleanor nodded, unsure how much English he understood. "My family," her voice cracked from disuse. "They cast me out." 28 years of privilege had not prepared Eleanor for abandonment. As the educated daughter of Joshua Bennett, railroad investor and Boston socialite, she had been raised with every advantage, except the freedom to determine her own future. "A woman of your standing must make an advantageous match," her father had declared when presenting William Blackwood as her intended husband. "Blackwood's connections will secure our interests in the Arizona Territory." Eleanor had initially accepted her duty, until the night she discovered William's true character at the territorial governor's dinner, when he had drunkenly struck a servant girl for spilling wine. Later, she had witnessed his cruel treatment of the local tribes, boasting of tactics that made her stomach turn. "I cannot marry such a man," she had told her father. His response had been swift and merciless. "You will marry Blackwood, or you are no daughter of mine." That night, she had packed a small bag and fled with only the clothes on her back and the savings she had secretly accumulated over years. She had planned to reach her aunt in California, but Blackwood's men had pursued her, forcing her deep into Apache territory where they dared not follow. Now, after days without food or proper shelter, her strength had finally failed her. And here, of all places, she had encountered not death but a moment of unexpected kindness. The chief studied her with eyes that seemed to see beyond her tattered appearance. "Why you cry?" Eleanor touched the tear tracks on her face, suddenly self-conscious. "I have nowhere to go. No one who wants me." He nodded slowly, as if her simple words conveyed volumes more than she had spoken. With deliberate movements, he removed a small pouch from his belt and extracted a piece of dried meat. "Eat," he said, offering it to her. Her hunger overwhelmed her hesitation. The jerky was tough and unfamiliar, but it was the most welcome meal she had ever received. "I am called Nakohi," he said, touching his chest. "Eleanor," she replied, mimicking his gesture. A distant call echoed through the canyon, voices speaking in a language she did not recognize. Nakohi's expression shifted subtly as he glanced toward the sound. "My people," he explained. "They search for me." Fear gripped Eleanor anew. One Apache might show unexpected mercy, but a band of warriors would surely see only an enemy on their land. Nakohi seemed to read her thoughts. "You are hurt. Need medicine." He gestured toward the direction of the voices. "My village has healer." Eleanor shook her head rapidly. "They will kill me." Nakohi's weathered face softened slightly. "Not if under my protection." He rose to his feet and extended his hand once more. "Choose now, alone in wilderness, or chance with my people." With nowhere else to turn and her strength fading, Eleanor made the decision that would alter the course of her life. She reached up and placed her pale hand in his dark one. That the approach to the Apache village felt like the longest journey of Eleanor's life. Each step beside the towering chief sent waves of uncertainty through her exhausted body. Her mind conjured images from penny dreadfuls, scalping knives and torture stakes, that she tried desperately to dismiss. Nakohi moved with deliberate slowness, occasionally glancing back to ensure she followed. When she stumbled over a rock, he paused, reaching into a small leather pouch at his waist. "Medicine," he explained, offering a few dried leaves. "Chew, for strength." The bitter herbs made her eyes water, but warmth spread through her limbs almost immediately. A powerful stimulant, Eleanor realized, recognizing the technique from her readings on indigenous peoples. Knowledge her finishing school teachers would have considered most improper for a lady. The first sign of the village was smoke rising above the juniper trees. Then came the sounds: children's laughter, dogs barking, the rhythmic tapping of work. Normal, human sounds that eased Eleanor's racing heart slightly, until they emerged from the trees and all activity ceased. Women paused in their work. Children froze in their play. Warriors reached instinctively for weapons. The silence was absolute, heavy with tension and disbelief. Nakohi raised his hand in what Eleanor interpreted as a gesture of reassurance. He spoke several sentences in his native tongue, his voice calm but authoritative. The stares boring into Eleanor made her acutely aware of her disheveled appearance and obvious foreignness. One elderly woman spat on the ground. A child began to cry and was quickly hushed by its mother. A tall warrior stepped forward, his face a mask of outrage. He gestured angrily at Eleanor while addressing Nakohi in rapid, heated words. Nakohi's response was measured but firm. He placed a hand lightly on Eleanor's shoulder, a clear claim of protection that silenced the warrior temporarily, though his eyes still burned with hostility. An elderly woman emerged from one of the larger dwellings. Her silver-streaked hair was wrapped in leather strips, and her face bore the deep lines of a long, challenging life. Yet she carried herself with unmistakable dignity. "Nantai," Nakohi addressed her. "She needs help." The old woman, evidently the tribe's healer, approached Eleanor with cautious curiosity. Her dark eyes missed nothing, from Eleanor's torn clothing to her blistered hands. Unlike the others, her gaze held no hostility, only clinical assessment. "She is weak but not dying," Nantai declared in surprisingly clear English. "Why bring her here? She was abandoned, alone." Nantai's weathered face revealed nothing. "Many whites would abandon one of us. Why should we help her?" Eleanor summoned what little strength remained. "I ask nothing but temporary shelter," she said. "I can work. I can learn." The healer's eyebrows rose slightly at Eleanor's direct address. She turned to Nakohi. "The council will not approve." "I will speak to them," he replied. Nantai sighed, the sound of someone accepting an unwanted task. "Bring her to my lodge. I will see what can be done." As Eleanor followed the healer through the village, she felt the weight of dozens of stares. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts. Men whispered among themselves. One young woman made an unmistakable gesture of cutting a throat. Inside Nantai's dwelling, the air was fragrant with unfamiliar herbs and smoke. Bundles of plants hung from the ceiling. Clay pots lined the walls. "Sit," Nantai instructed, pointing to a woven mat. "Remove your dress." When Eleanor hesitated, the old woman clicked her tongue impatiently. "I am healer. You are patient. Nothing more." As Eleanor reluctantly complied, Nakohi respectfully turned to leave. At the entrance, he paused. "I must speak with the council now. They will decide your fate." His dark eyes held something Eleanor couldn't quite interpret. "But know this, you are under my protection until they decide." The deerskin flap closed behind him, leaving Eleanor alone with the inscrutable medicine woman and the terrifying uncertainty of what was to come. Eleanor winced as Nantai applied a pungent paste to the raw scrapes on her arms. The old woman worked in silence, her gnarled fingers surprisingly gentle as she treated each wound with methodical precision. A clay healing bowl, blackened by years of use, sat between them, containing mixtures whose scents Eleanor could not identify. "How did you learn English?" Eleanor finally asked, unable to bear the silence any longer. Nantai's hands never paused in their work. "Mission school. Long ago." Her voice held no emotion. "They thought they could change me. But they couldn't." Eleanor observed. The faintest smile touched the old woman's lips. No, they could not. She dipped her fingers into the bowl again. You have fever beginning. This will help. The paste applied to Eleanor's forehead smelled of mint and something earthy. Despite her exhaustion, curiosity sparked in Eleanor's mind. What plants do you use? Nantai looked up, studying Eleanor's face with new interest. You know of plants? A little. I read medical journals whenever I could. My father thought it inappropriate. Men often do. Nantai pointed to various bundles hanging from the ceiling. Sage for cleansing, willow bark for pain, prickly pear for wounds. Over the next few days, Eleanor's strength gradually returned under Nantai's care. The healer's initial reluctance gave way to guarded acceptance as Eleanor demonstrated genuine interest in her work. Each morning, Eleanor would watch as Nantai conducted her healing rituals, grinding herbs in the ancient clay bowl while softly chanting prayers to spirits. Eleanor did not understand but came to respect. Outside, the life of the village continued. Children's voices carried through the lodge walls. Occasionally, Nakohi would appear at the entrance, exchanging brief words with Nantai in their native tongue before departing again. He never directly addressed Eleanor during these visits, but his eyes would find hers in silent acknowledgement. On the fourth day, while Nantai was teaching her to prepare a poultice, shouting erupted outside. The old woman froze, listening intently. What is it? Eleanor asked. Scouts have returned. Nantai's expression darkened. With news. Before Eleanor could inquire further, the deerskin flap was thrust aside. The warrior who had confronted Nakohi on Eleanor's arrival stood in the entrance, his face contorted with rage. White men search for her. He spat in accented English, pointing an accusatory finger at Eleanor. They say Apache stole white woman. They threaten war. Eleanor's heart plummeted. William, she whispered. Nantai rose with surprising agility for her age. Kichi, this is Healing Lodge. You do not enter without permission. The warrior named Kichi barely acknowledged the rebuke. Council gathers. Chief wants the white woman present. His glare made clear his opinion of this decision. As Eleanor followed Kichi through the village, whispers and hostile stares surrounded her. News of searching white men had spread quickly, confirming many tribal members' worst fears, that her presence would bring danger. The council lodge was crowded when they arrived. Elders sat in a circle, their weathered faces solemn. Nakohi stood at the center, his posture rigid with the formality of his position. He gestured for Eleanor to join him. Tell them, he said simply. Tell them why men search for you. Eleanor looked around at the suspicious faces and summoned her courage. The man leading them is William Blackwood. I was to marry him, but discovered his cruelty. Her voice grew stronger. He has mistreated your people before. He boasted of driving Apache from their hunting grounds. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Nakohi translated her words, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the lodge. Elder Makya, whose white hair proclaimed his advanced years, spoke slowly. If what she says is true, this Blackwood will not stop searching. He will see her return as matter of pride. And if she stays, Kichi interjected, he will bring soldiers against us. Eleanor felt the weight of her impossible position. Her presence endangered these people who had shown her unexpected mercy. Yet returning to William meant a life of subjugation or worse. Nakohi's voice cut through her thoughts. She will stay, he declared, until she is strong enough to travel safely elsewhere. This I have decided. The finality in his tone silenced further debate, though Eleanor could see it did not end disagreement. As the council dispersed, she realized that her fate remained as uncertain as ever, and that she had become the center of a conflict that threatened the very people who had saved her life. Gah, Nakohi said, pointing to the rabbit that hung from the drying rack. Gah, Eleanor repeated, her tongue struggling with the unfamiliar sound. They sat on a flat rock at the village's edge, far enough away to avoid the stairs that still followed Eleanor after 2 weeks among the Apache. In the dirt between them lay a smooth wooden stick, carved with notches and symbols, Nakohi's teaching tool. 2, he continued, drawing a circle to represent water. 2, she echoed, the simplicity of the word belying the complexity of what they were attempting. Each morning, while the village stirred to life, Nakohi would appear at Nantai's lodge. Walk, he would say, and Eleanor would follow him to this quiet place where he patiently taught her the rudiments of his language. She did not understand why the chief himself undertook this task, but she was grateful for these moments away from hostile glares. Her injuries had mostly healed under Nantai's care. The fever had broken days ago. Soon, she would need to decide her next steps, but the thought of leaving filled her with unexpected dread. "Why do you teach me?" she asked during one of their sessions. Nakohi considered her question, his weathered face revealing nothing. "One who knows both tongues is valuable," he said simply. But Eleanor sensed there was more. Something in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. A sadness, perhaps, or a hope. When not with Nakohi, Eleanor found ways to make herself useful. She helped Nantai gather herbs, learning the properties of desert plants. She offered to mend clothing, her fine stitching from years of needlepoint proving surprisingly practical. The children were the first to warm to her. Unlike their parents, they approached her with unfiltered curiosity rather than suspicion. A small girl named Talyuta became her particular shadow, following Eleanor as she performed her tasks and giggling whenever Eleanor attempted Apache words. "She has no mother," Nantai explained one evening. "Lost to sickness 2 winters ago." Eleanor's heart ached for the child. "Where is her father?" "Killed by soldiers," the old woman replied matter-of-factly. "Many children here have lost parents. It is our way to care for them together." This communal approach to childcare struck Eleanor as both foreign and beautiful compared to the rigid structures of her Boston upbringing. One afternoon, while collecting water, Eleanor noticed Talyuta and several other children playing near a pile of rocks. Suddenly, Talyuta screamed. The distinctive rattle sent ice through Eleanor's veins, a sound she recognized from her readings on Western wildlife. Without thinking, Eleanor dropped her water jug and ran. The rattlesnake, disturbed by the children's play, had coiled to strike. In one fluid motion, Eleanor snatched Talyuta away, spinning to place her own body between the child and danger. The snake struck, but found only air as Eleanor stumbled backward with Talyuta clutched to her chest. They fell together onto the hard ground as shouts erupted around them. Kichi appeared with several warriors. One swift strike from a stick, and the threat was eliminated. But it was not the snake that held everyone's attention. It was Eleanor's instinctive protection of an Apache child. That evening, something shifted in the village's atmosphere. Mothers who had previously pulled their children away now nodded in acknowledgement when Eleanor passed. An elder woman pressed a small piece of dried fruit into her hand. Not acceptance, perhaps, but the first thaw in their cold regard. Later, Nakohi approached as Eleanor sat outside Nantai's lodge, watching the sunset. "You risked yourself for Talyuta," he said, lowering himself beside her. Eleanor shrugged. "I didn't think. I just acted. Sometimes the body knows what the mind does not." He studied her with those unfathomable dark eyes. "Tomorrow we hunt. The men will be gone 3 days." She nodded, unsure why he shared this information. He reached to his belt and unsheathed a small knife with a bone handle, offering it to her. "For protection," he explained. "Not all danger comes with a rattle to warn you." As his fingers brushed hers in the exchange, Eleanor felt an unexpected warmth that had nothing to do with the desert heat. For the first time since arriving, she wondered if she might find not just refuge here, but something more. Something she had never found in the world she'd left behind. Dawn broke over the village with unusual activity. Women packed dried foods and water containers while men checked bowstrings and sharpened hunting knives. The seasonal deer hunt was a crucial event, one that would determine how well the tribe would eat in the coming months. Eleanor watched from the doorway of Nantai's lodge. The small hunting knife Nakohi had given her now hanging from a leather cord at her waist. Though she had carried it for only a day, its weight already felt familiar, comforting. You should help with preparations, Nantai suggested, nudging Eleanor toward the center of activity. Standing apart makes others suspicious. Swallowing her uncertainty, Eleanor approached a group of women preparing rawhide containers for preserving meat. Their conversation halted abruptly at her arrival. I would like to help, Eleanor offered in halting Apache words. The women exchanged glances until one, Kalina, who had shown Eleanor small kindnesses since the snake incident, nodded toward an empty space beside her. You know how to preserve meat? Eleanor sat, choosing her limited Apache vocabulary carefully. In my world, different ways, but I learn your ways. Her willingness to learn rather than impose her own methods seemed to soften their reserve. Soon, Kalina was demonstrating how to prepare the containers with salt and herbs, her hands guiding Eleanor's through the unfamiliar process. Near the village center, Nakohi addressed the assembled hunters, his commanding presence drawing all eyes. Kichi stood nearby, his expression darkening when he noticed Eleanor working among the women. The white woman learns our ways quickly, he remarked loudly enough for many to hear. Perhaps too quickly. What will she do with this knowledge when she returns to her people? The women around Eleanor stiffened, their brief camaraderie evaporating like morning dew under the harsh sun. Nakohi's sharp glance silenced Kichi momentarily, but the damage was done. The whispered suspicions that had begun to fade now resurged like a rekindled flame. Later, as the hunting party made final preparations, Eleanor approached Nakohi, conscious of watchful eyes. I wish to be useful while the hunters are gone, she said. I know ways to preserve meat that might complement your methods. Nakohi considered her words carefully, aware of Kichi hovering within earshot. You will work with Nantai. The women will bring the first meat to you both. It was a diplomatic solution, keeping Eleanor involved while placing her under the trusted healer's supervision. As Nakohi turned to leave, Eleanor found the courage to ask the question that had troubled her sleep. Have your scouts seen any sign of the men searching for me? His expression revealed nothing, but he stepped closer, speaking softly. Blackwood has established camp at the trading post. He offers reward for information on a kidnapped woman. Eleanor's breath caught. He knows I'm here? He suspects. Nakohi's voice dropped further. There are always those willing to trade information for white man's goods. The implication was clear. There could be informants even within the tribe. While we hunt, stay close to village, Nakohi instructed. Some young warriors who remained behind listened too closely to Kichi's words. As the hunting party prepared to depart, Eleanor noticed something unexpected. Several children gathering around Nakohi, touching his hands in what seemed a ritual of farewell. Among them was Talyuta, who received a gentle touch on her head from the chief. Nantai appeared beside Eleanor. They ask his blessing for safe return, she explained. Many are orphans under his special protection. This glimpse of Nakohi's tenderness toward the children revealed yet another layer to the complex man who had saved her life. The hunting party departed as the sun climbed higher, disappearing into the rocky terrain beyond the village. Eleanor watched until Nakohi's distinctive figure vanished from sight, an unexpected hollowness forming in her chest. That night, as she helped Nantai sort medicinal herbs, Eleanor found herself straining to hear every sound from beyond the village perimeter, her hand often straying to the knife at her waist. You worry for him, Nantai observed without looking up from her work. For all of them, Eleanor corrected quickly. The old woman's knowing smile spoke volumes. The chief has not looked at a woman as he looks at you since his wife walked among the ancestors. Eleanor's hands faltered in their task. He barely speaks to me. Some men say most when their mouths are closed. Nantai tied a bundle of sage with practiced efficiency. But be careful where such glances lead. The path between your world and his runs through dangerous country. The hunting party returned at dusk on the third day, laden with deer and triumph. Women and children rushed to greet them, their excited voices filling the air. Eleanor remained near Nantai's lodge, relief washing over her at the sight of Nakohi leading his men safely home. Their success lifted the village's spirits. That night, meat roasted over open fires, while elders told ancient stories beneath a blanket of stars. Eleanor sat at the gathering's edge, understanding little of the tales but appreciating the rhythmic beauty of the language she was slowly learning. As the celebration continued, Nakohi appeared beside her, his sudden presence startling her from her thoughts. "Your help with preserving meat is noticed," he said, settling onto the ground with the fluid grace that still surprised her in such a powerful man. "Kalinia says your methods keep flies away better." "A small trick with certain herbs," Eleanor replied, warmed by the unexpected praise. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the dancing flames. The firelight softened Nakohi's stern features, revealing a man who might have smiled easily in another life. "Your people have beautiful stories," she ventured. "They tell of who we are," he replied, "of where we come from, of how to live in balance." He glanced at her. "Your people have no stories?" "Many, but they're written in books, not carried in memory." "When books burn, stories die," Nakohi observed. "When memory lives, stories cannot be killed." The profound simplicity of his words struck Eleanor deeply. How much of her own heritage had she taken for granted, imprisoned in leather-bound volumes rather than kept alive through the generations? Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the village perimeter. Two scouts approached at a run, their expressions grim as they headed directly for Nakohi. He rose immediately, listening intently to their rapid report. Eleanor caught fragments: white men, guns not far. The celebration dissolved as warriors gathered around their chief. Eleanor followed at a distance, her heart pounding with a terrible certainty that she was somehow responsible for whatever news had arrived. When Nakohi finally turned to address the tribe, his face had returned to the impassive mask of leadership. "Armed settlers move along our southern boundary," he announced. "Too many for chance hunting party. They search patterns." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Eyes turned accusingly toward Eleanor. "They do not yet approach village," Nakohi continued, "but we will post more guards. Hunting parties will go out in larger groups." As the crowd dispersed to implement these precautions, one of the scouts approached Eleanor directly. Without a word, he pressed something into her hand. A rifle bullet, recently fired, found embedded in a tree near their hunting grounds. The message was unmistakable. The danger was real, and in their minds, she had brought it to their doorstep. That night, sleep eluded Eleanor. The bullet lay beside her sleeping mat, its leaden weight a physical manifestation of her guilt. How many lives might be risked because of her presence? How much blood might be shed? As the village quieted and the moon rose high, Eleanor made her decision. Gathering the few possessions she had acquired, a water skin, some dried meat, the knife Nakohi had given her, she silently packed a small bundle. She would leave before dawn, while even the guards grew drowsy. Head west, away from the searching settlers, away from the tribe that had shown her unexpected kindness. Better to face the wilderness alone than bring death to those who had saved her life. The night deepened. When even Nantai's breathing had settled into the rhythm of deep sleep, Eleanor rose. With careful steps, she navigated through the silent lodge and out into the starlit night. She had barely reached the village edge when a shadow detached itself from the darkness of a nearby dwelling. "You think leaving protects us?" Nakohi's voice was soft but clear in the night stillness. Eleanor froze, her bundle clutched to her chest. "How did you know?" "I would have done the same." He stepped closer. "But you will not survive alone. And Blackwood will still come, whether you are here or not." "Because I ran from him?" "Because our lands stand between him and what he wants." Nakohi's eyes reflected the starlight. "You are just his excuse." The truth in his words pierced Eleanor's desperate plan. Her departure wouldn't save these people. It would only add her death to whatever Blackwood intended. "Come," Nakohi said gently. "There is another way." Nakohi led Eleanor away from the sleeping village, following a narrow path that wound upward through juniper and pine. Neither spoke as they climbed, their breath visible in the cool night air. After nearly half an hour, they emerged onto a flat mesa overlooking the valley below. "Few come here," Nakohi said, settling onto a smooth boulder. "My thinking place." Eleanor sat nearby, her abandoned escape attempt still fresh in her mind. "You said there was another way. First, understanding." He gestured to the brilliant canopy of stars above them. "Look up." The night sky blazed with more stars than Eleanor had ever seen in Boston's lamplit environs. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a river of light. Nakohi pulled a rolled piece of deerskin from his belt. When he unfurled it, Eleanor could see intricate markings. Lines connecting dots in patterns she didn't recognize. "Our ancestors mapped the sky," he explained, pointing from the deerskin to the stars above. "Each pattern tells story, guides our seasons, our ceremonies." He traced a constellation with his finger. "The bear, who leads warriors to hunt." His hand shifted. "The woman who weeps, whose tears became the first rain." The reverence in his voice touched something in Eleanor. "In my world, we also see pictures in the stars, but different ones." "Show me," he invited. Eleanor pointed upward. "There, we call that the Big Dipper, part of a great bear too." She traced another pattern. "And there is Orion, a mighty hunter from ancient stories." "Different words, same stars," Nakohi observed thoughtfully. For the next hour, they exchanged celestial knowledge. His passed through generations of oral tradition, hers learned from astronomy books in her father's library. The simple act of sharing something so fundamental, yet so different, bridged a gap between them that Eleanor hadn't fully recognized until now. "Why did you help me that day by the river?" she finally asked. Nakohi was silent for so long that Eleanor thought he might not answer. "8 winters ago," he eventually said, "my wife Natika and our son fell sick with white man's disease. Spotted fever." His voice remained steady, but Eleanor sensed the depth of pain beneath it. "I rode 3 days to trading post seeking medicine. The trader had it but refused to sell to Apache. Said supplies limited." Eleanor's heart constricted at the implication. "They died while you sought help." He nodded once, the simple gesture conveying years of grief. "Since then, I see differently. Not all white, not all Apache. Just people who help or do not help." The profound simplicity of his worldview brought unexpected tears to Eleanor's eyes. "I'm sorry about your family. You carry loss too," he observed. "I see it when you think no one watches." The perceptiveness of his comment startled her. "My mother died when I was 16. My father became different afterward. Harder. More concerned with business than family. So we both walk with ghosts." Nakohi looked out over the darkened valley. "Tell me of your Boston. What you left behind." Eleanor described her life, the rigid social expectations, the finishing school that taught proper manners but discouraged independent thought, the gradual realization that women like her were valued primarily as ornaments and alliance builders between powerful families. "My father arranged marriages for my 2 older sisters. Both now live with men who see them as property." She hugged her knees to her chest. "I couldn't face the same fate." "So you ran," Nakohi said. "Not a judgment, merely an observation." "Yes, though I didn't plan to run quite so far." A smile touched her lips despite the gravity of their conversation. Nakohi reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. In the moonlight, Eleanor recognized it as the book she always carried, a volume of Emerson's essays that had been her mother's. "You read from this sometimes," he said, offering it to her. "What words does it hold?" Touched that he had thought to bring it, Eleanor opened to a familiar page. "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us," she read. "Wise words," Nakohi acknowledged. "Your writer would make good elder." As the night deepened around them, Eleanor realized something had fundamentally changed between them. In sharing their stories beneath the vast Arizona sky, they had become more than chief and outsider. They had become 2 people finding unexpected common ground in a world determined to keep them apart. The warning came shortly after midday, riders approaching from the east, a white flag visible among them. Eleanor was helping Nantai sort medicinal plants when Dakota burst into the healer's lodge. "Chief wants you both," he said tersely. White men come to talk. Eleanor's blood ran cold. How many? 5 riders. Dakota's expression revealed his distrust. One calls himself Blackwood. Nantai's weathered hand gripped Eleanor's arm. You do not have to face him. But Eleanor straightened her shoulders, a strange calm settling over her. Yes, I do. The entire tribe had gathered by the time they reached the village center. Warriors stood in a protective semicircle before, their people weapons visible but not raised. Nakohi stood at their center, his face an impassive mask. Eleanor positioned herself slightly behind him, where she could see without being immediately noticed. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the riders approached the village boundary and halted their horses. William Blackwood sat astride a magnificent black stallion, his tailored suit incongruous against the rugged landscape. Beside him rode the local sheriff and 3 armed men. The white flag of truce fluttered from a wooden pole carried by one of the men. I seek to speak with your chief, Blackwood called out, his voice carrying the polished tones of Eastern education. Nakohi stepped forward. I am Chief Nakohi. Why do you come to our land? Blackwood surveyed the assembled tribe with barely concealed disdain before his gaze landed on Eleanor. A smile that didn't reach his eyes spread across his handsome face. Miss Bennet, thank heavens you're alive. He turned to the sheriff. You see, just as I said, these savages have been holding her captive. Eleanor moved to stand beside Nakohi. I am not a captive, William. I am here by choice. Blackwood's expression hardened momentarily before he composed himself. My dear, you've clearly been through an ordeal. Whatever these people have told you. The Apache saved my life, Eleanor interrupted, her voice stronger than she expected. After I fled from you. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. Mr. Blackwood reported you were kidnapped from your father's ranch. A lie, Eleanor stated flatly. My father disowned me because I refused to marry this man. I left of my own accord. Blackwood's charming facade slipped further. Eleanor, your father is gravely ill. He sent me to bring you home. His voice lowered to a concerned tone. He wants to make amends before it's too late. The mention of her father staggered Eleanor. Could it be true? Or just another manipulation? Nakohi's deep voice cut through her uncertainty. If woman wishes to leave, she may. If she wishes to stay, she will be protected. Blackwood's face flushed with barely contained rage. This is absurd. She's a white woman of good family. She belongs with her own kind. I belong where I choose, Eleanor replied. The sheriff cleared his throat. Miss Bennet, I must advise you to return with us. Tensions in the territory are high. The governor can't guarantee protection for this tribe if there's belief they're holding white women against their will. The veiled threat hung in the air like ginsmoke. 3 days? Blackwood suddenly proposed. Take 3 days to consider, Eleanor. We'll camp at Cedar Creek. His smile returned, cold and calculating. If you haven't joined us by sunset on the 3rd day, I'll be forced to return with more persuasive company. The implication was clear. Next time he would bring soldiers. The woman has spoken, Nakohi replied evenly. Your threats change nothing. Blackwood's gaze shifted to the chief, measuring him with open contempt. Do you know what happens to Indian tribes that interfere with territorial development, Chief? They disappear. He straightened in his saddle. Consider carefully where your hospitality might lead your people. With that, he wheeled his horse around. The others followed, the white flag now seeming more mockery than peace offering. As they rode away, the tribe erupted in anxious discussion. Kichi approached Nakohi, his expression thunderous. You risk all our lives for this white woman? Blackwood wants our land, Nakohi replied calmly. With or without her. Eleanor stared after the departing riders, shame and fear coiling within her. He won't stop, she whispered. He never stops until he gets what he wants. Nakohi's hand briefly touched her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that did not go unnoticed by watchful tribal eyes. Then he will learn, the chief said quietly, that some things cannot be taken by force, not while I breathe. The council lodge had never seemed so crowded. Every elder, every warrior, and even respected women like Nantai had gathered, their faces illuminated by the central fire as night descended. At the center lay the tribal council's talking stick, a length of polished wood adorned with eagle feathers and sacred symbols, passed down through generations. Eleanor sat near the entrance, aware that her presence at such a gathering was unprecedented. The tension in the air was palpable. Nakohi stood before his people, his voice resonant in the enclosed space. Blackwood threatens not because of the white woman, but because he covets our land, the silver in our mountains, the water in our valleys. Kichi rose, his tall frame casting a long shadow. Yet it is her presence that gives him excuse to bring soldiers. He pointed accusingly at Eleanor. Before she came, they watched from distance. Now they come to our door. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Elder Makya lifted his ancient hand, and the room quieted instantly. When he reached for the talking stick, a younger warrior reverently placed it in his gnarled fingers. "I have seen 87 summers," Makya began, his voice thin but clear. "I have watched white men come with promises, with papers, with guns. They take whether we give or not." He gestured toward Eleanor with the stick. "This woman is not our enemy, but her people will come regardless. The question is not whether she stays or goes. The question is how we face what comes either way." Takoda, Nakohi's trusted second, took the stick next. "The chief is right. Blackwood spoke truth when he threatened. But he lied about his reasons. He wants what lies beneath our feet, not the woman." A younger warrior named Hanska seized the stick. "Then let us fight now. Why wait for them to bring more guns?" His words sparked shouts of approval from other young men. "And die for nothing?" Nantai interjected, reaching for the stick. Despite her age, her voice carried authority that silenced the warriors. "Our strength has always been in knowing when to fight and when to find another path." Kichi reclaimed the talking stick. "There is no path here except the one that leads to war or surrender. And it began when we allowed a white woman into our midst." He turned to face Eleanor directly. "If she truly means no harm, let her go back to her people. Remove Blackwood's excuse." All eyes turned to Eleanor. Nakohi made a slight gesture, offering her the right to speak. Rising slowly, Eleanor accepted the talking stick, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic. She had rehearsed words in her mind since Blackwood's visit, but now they seemed inadequate. "I have no people to return to," she began, her voice gaining strength with each word. "My father disowned me. Blackwood wants me only as property." She looked around the circle, meeting eyes both hostile and sympathetic. "I know my presence brings danger. I would leave if it would truly protect you. But Blackwood lies. He wants your land, and I am merely his convenient reason to take it." She handed the stick back to Nakohi, who stepped into the center of the circle. "As chief, I must think of our people's future. Fighting alone against many guns brings only death. Running from our ancestral lands brings only slow death of spirit." He planted the talking stick firmly before him. "There must be another way." "What way?" challenged Kichi. "Will you beg the white governor for mercy? Will you sign away more land for peace that never lasts?" "No," Nakohi replied calmly. "I will show them that we and the white settlers share common enemy. Men like Blackwood who break both our laws." Confusion rippled through the assembly. Elder Makya leaned forward. "Explain this path, chief. The white woman knows Blackwood's crimes. Against her, against others. If her words reached the territorial governor instead of Blackwood's lies." Kichi laughed bitterly. "And who would believe her over a rich white man? Who would carry her safely to this governor?" "I would," Nakohi stated simply. Shocked silence fell over the council. "Impossible," Kichi declared. "You cannot leave the tribe undefended to escort this woman. Unless," Elder Makya interjected thoughtfully, "she is truly one of us." The ancient elder's words hung in the air like smoke. Gradually, their meaning dawned on the assembly. The trial of belonging. Nantai whispered. Nakohi nodded slowly. If she passes, none can deny her place among us, or her right to our protection. No outsider has taken the trial in 4 generations, Takota observed. Then it is time, Nakohi replied, his eyes finding Eleanor's across the firelit lodge. If she is willing. Eleanor didn't understand everything being said, but she recognized the moment for what it was. A crossroads, not just for her, but for everyone present. I am willing, she said, though she had no idea what she was agreeing to. The trial tests not just strength, but spirit, Nantai explained as she prepared a small bundle of sacred items. To belong to the people, you must face the wilderness alone and return with a sign from the ancestors. Eleanor sat cross-legged in the healer's lodge, watching the old woman's methodical preparations with growing apprehension. Since the council meeting the previous night, the entire tribe had buzzed with discussion of the upcoming trial. Children stared at her with new curiosity, while the adults' attitudes ranged from skepticism to grudging respect for her willingness to undertake the ancient challenge. What kind of sign? Eleanor asked, fingering the knife Nakohi had given her, now her most valued possession. Nantai shrugged. If I told you, it would not be your sign. She wrapped a small piece of white clay in a square of buckskin. Sometimes it is an object. Sometimes it is knowledge. Sometimes it is a story worth telling. She added the package to the growing bundle. The ancestors decide. And if I find nothing? The old woman's hands paused. Then you do not belong. The simplicity of the answer chilled Eleanor more than any elaborate explanation could have. Later that day, Nakohi himself came to instruct her. They sat by the small stream that ran near the village, where he had been teaching her the Apache language. 3 days alone, he explained. No weapons except your knife. Small water skin. No food. Eleanor's eyes widened. No food at all? The land provides for those who belong to it. His expression softened slightly at her obvious alarm. You have learned much about plants from Nantai, about tracking from watching our hunters, about listening from our stories. Not enough, Eleanor whispered. More than you know. Nakohi picked up a stick and drew a rough map in the dirt. You will go north into the high valley beyond the Twin Peaks. There is water there, game, but also danger, mountain lions, snakes. He marked locations with small symbols. Return by following the water downstream. It leads back to our river. The task seemed impossible. Eleanor had never spent a night alone outdoors in her life, let alone 3 days in mountain wilderness. Why are you doing this for me? She asked suddenly. Nakohi looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers directly. The question is why you do this for us. The evening before her departure, a ceremony was held. The entire tribe gathered around the central fire as Eleanor was brought forward wearing clothes Kalinia had helped her make. Buckskin leggings and a simple tunic adorned with minimal beadwork. Her hair was braided in the Apache style with a single eagle feather tied at the end, a gift from Elder Makia himself. Nakohi stood before her, magnificent in his ceremonial attire. Behind him, for elders chanted softly, their voices blending with the night sounds. The trial of belonging is as old as our people, Nakohi proclaimed. When one not born to us wishes to become NDE, the people, they must prove the ancestors accept them. Eleanor knelt as instructed while Nantai approached with a small clay bowl containing a reddish paste. The old woman painted symbols on Eleanor's forehead, cheeks, and the backs of her hands. Protection, Nantai murmured. Wisdom, strength. Nakohi then presented the Vision Quest bundle, a small deerskin pouch containing the sacred items Nantai had prepared, along with pinches of tobacco, corn pollen, and other offerings for the spirits. Carry this always, he instructed. Leave offerings at water, at sunrise, at sunset. Eleanor accepted the bundle, feeling its surprising weight, spiritual rather than physical. If you do not return by the 3rd sunset, Nakohi continued, his voice solemn, we will know the ancestors have decided. The unspoken implication hung heavy in the night air. She would be presumed dead or rejected by the spirits. As the ceremony concluded, tribal members approached one by one. Some offered a word of encouragement. Others simply touched her shoulder in silent acknowledgement. Even Kitchi stepped forward, his perpetual frown momentarily softened. "Return with honor or not at all," he said, the closest thing to acceptance he had ever shown her. Dawn came too quickly. Eleanor stood at the village edge, the Vision Quest bundle secured to her waist alongside her water skin and knife. Nakohi waited to guide her to the trial's starting point. "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Fear keeps you alive," he replied. "Courage keeps you moving despite it." As they walked away from the village, Eleanor cast one glance back at the place that had become more home to her than any mansion in Boston. Whether she would see it again depended entirely on her own resources, and perhaps on whatever spirits watched over these ancient lands. Eleanor's first day alone tested every lesson she had absorbed in her time with the Apache. Nakohi had left her at dawn beside a small spring that trickled from between ancient rocks, with the Twin Peaks rising in the distance, her destination and the center of her trial. "Trust what you have learned," were his final words before he turned and walked away, leaving her truly alone for the first time since her escape from William. The silence was absolute. No Boston street noise, no village sounds, not even the murmur of conversation from a nearby lodge. Just whined through pine needles and the occasional call of a hunting bird. Eleanor took inventory of her resources. The knife at her waist, a small water skin, the Vision Quest bundle, and whatever knowledge she had gained. No food, no blanket, no companion. The enormity of her situation threatened to overwhelm her. "One step," she whispered to herself. Then another. She remembered Nantai's lessons about edible plants and spent her morning gathering prickly pear pads, carefully, removing the spines as the old woman had taught her. The pulpy flesh wasn't filling, but it provided moisture and some sustenance. By midday, she had reached the base of the first peak. The climb was arduous. Twice she lost her footing on loose shale, scraping her palms raw. The sun beat mercilessly upon her back, and her water skin was already half empty. When she finally crested a ridge that offered a view of the valley beyond, Eleanor sank to her knees in exhaustion. The vista that greeted her stole what little breath remained in her lungs. A hidden valley stretched below, lush with vegetation around a small lake fed by mountain streams. In Boston, she had visited art galleries where paintings of the American wilderness commanded high prices, but no canvas could capture the raw magnificence before her. As the sun began its descent, Eleanor made her way down to the lake. Following Nakohi's instructions, she left a small offering of tobacco at the water's edge, her fingers trembling slightly as she performed the unfamiliar ritual. That night, huddled beneath an overhanging rock, she experienced a loneliness more profound than any she had known. The stars wheeled overhead, brilliant and indifferent to her small presence in the vast wilderness. Hunger gnawed at her stomach. Every snapping twig in the darkness sent her heart racing. "I cannot do this," she whispered into the night. Yet when dawn broke, she rose. She found berries where Nantai had taught her to look. She dug roots that eased her hunger pangs. She caught a small fish with her bare hands in a shallow pool, a technique she had observed children practicing in the village. The second day brought rain, a brief, violent storm that left her shivering and drenched. But it also revealed unexpected gifts. Mushrooms sprouting from suddenly fertile ground, a clearer view of game trails through dampened dust. By the second sunset, something was changing within Eleanor. The constant awareness of danger, of vulnerability, had sharpened her senses. She moved differently, touching the earth with deliberate steps, listening with her whole body rather than just her ears. That night, as she huddled beside a small fire she had struggled for hours to create, a sudden movement at the edge of her camp brought her instantly alert. Two gleaming eyes reflected her firelight. A mountain lion, powerful and silent, regarding her with predatory interest. Eleanor's hand found her knife, though she knew it would provide little defense against such a creature. For endless seconds, woman and beast observed each other across the flickering barrier of flames. Then, drawing on half-remembered instructions from tribal hunters, Eleanor stood tall, raised her arms to appear larger, and shouted with all the force her lungs could muster. The sudden sound echoed across the valley, startling even herself with its primal power. The mountain lion held its ground momentarily, then melted away into the darkness. Sleep eluded her after that encounter. Instead, Eleanor found herself contemplating the strange journey that had brought her here. From corseted society lady to a woman who could face a mountain lion alone in the wilderness. Dawn of the third day broke with unexpected clarity. Eleanor prepared to begin her return journey when a flash of white caught her eye. A single eagle feather drifting down from above, landing almost at her feet. She reached for it with reverent fingers. Was this the sign she sought? It seemed too simple, too coincidental. Yet its perfect timing gave her pause. As she secured the feather in her hair, a sound carried on the morning breeze, voices, distant but distinct. Human voices where there should be none. Curiosity overrode caution. Gathering her meager belongings, Eleanor followed the sound to a ridge overlooking a small canyon. Below, to her shock, she saw a camp. Not Apache, but white settlers. She counted 5 men, including one she recognized with a jolt of fear. William Blackwood. Eleanor crept closer to the settlers' camp, her newly acquired stealth allowing her to move undetected among the rocks and scrub. Blackwood stood over a makeshift table, a crate turned upside down, studying what appeared to be a map spread across its surface. "The Apache village sits here," he was saying, pointing to a location. "The water source is here. Once we control it, they'll have no choice but to relocate. Or fight," one of the men suggested. Blackwood's smile was cold. "Either way, we win. Dead Indians or departed ones, the result is the same. The governor's development plans proceed, and we all profit handsomely." Eleanor's blood ran cold. This was never about her. Blackwood was using her supposed kidnapping as pretext for something far more sinister. "What about the cavalry?" another man asked. "Captain Rogers won't move against the Apache without clear provocation. Which is why we'll provide it," Blackwood replied smoothly. "A raiding party of Apache warriors will attack the Dawson homestead tomorrow night. Several settlers will tragically die." His voice hardened. "By the time anyone discovers the raiders weren't actually Apache, it will be too late." Eleanor had heard enough. Blackwood wasn't just planning to displace the tribe. He was orchestrating a false flag attack to justify their slaughter. She needed to warn Nakohe immediately, even if it meant abandoning her trial. As she backed away, her foot dislodged a small stone. The tiny sound might as well have been a gunshot in the quiet canyon. "What was that?" one of the men said, reaching for his rifle. Eleanor didn't wait. She scrambled up the ridge, abandoning stealth for speed. A shout confirmed she'd been spotted. Then came the crack of a rifle, the bullet splintering rock inches from her head. Pure instinct took over. She ran as she had never run before, using every scrap of knowledge gained from watching the Apache hunters. Moving in short bursts, using terrain for cover, doubling back to confuse pursuit. She heard the men crashing through the brush behind her, their voices growing more distant as her smaller size and desperate speed gave her an advantage in the rough terrain. When she reached the stream that would lead her back to the village, she waded into the water, remembering Takota's explanation of how water masked scent and footprints. The cold current stole her breath, but she pushed forward, alternating between the stream and parallel game trails. The eagle feather remained securely tied in her hair, her only trophy from a vision quest now cut short by urgent necessity. It was nearly sunset of the third day when Eleanor stumbled into the Apache village, her clothes torn, her body bruised, her lungs burning with exertion. She had completed the journey back in half the expected time, driving herself beyond what she thought possible. The villagers gathered quickly, expressions of surprise and confusion on their faces. Eleanor had returned early, a sign of either failure or emergency. Nakohe emerged from the council lodge, his face revealing momentary shock at her condition before resuming its usual stoic mask. "I saw them," Eleanor gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "Blackwood, planning attack." Takota stepped forward with a water skin, which she gratefully accepted. "You failed the trial," Kichi observed coldly from the gathering crowd. You return early with nothing but stories. Nothing, Eleanor countered. Reaching into her tunic to withdraw a folded paper she had torn from Blackwood's table during her frantic escape. Their map, their plan. Nakohi took the creased document, studying it intently. It showed not just the village location, but water sources, hunting grounds, and proposed settler developments across tribal lands. Notes in Blackwood's handwriting detailed a strategy to force the tribe into an impossible position. Fight and be destroyed by the cavalry, or leave and face starvation away from their traditional territories. They plan to attack the Dawson homestead tomorrow, Eleanor continued, her breathing steadier now. Disguised as Apache, to provoke the cavalry against you. A ripple of alarm spread through the gathered tribe. Even Kichi's hostile expression faltered as the implications became clear. She speaks truth, Nakohi declared, holding up the map for all to see. This is Blackwood's writing. These are plans made in secret, not for Apache eyes. Elder Makia stepped forward, his ancient eyes fixed on Eleanor. You abandoned your vision quest to bring this warning? Eleanor nodded, suddenly aware that in saving the tribe, she might have sacrificed her chance to become one of them. The trial seemed less important than your lives. The old man's weathered face cracked into an unexpected smile. The trial of belonging is not about enduring hardship for its own sake. It is about proving that the good of the people comes before your own desires. He gestured to the map in Nakohi's hands. I see no failure here. I see the sign we sought. Murmurs of agreement spread through the gathering, even from those who had been most skeptical of her. Nakohi stepped forward, the eagle feather in Eleanor's hair catching his attention. You found this. It came to me, she replied simply, just before I discovered Blackwood's camp. Something like pride flickered in Nakohi's eyes. Then the ancestors have spoken twice. He turned to address the tribe. We must prepare. Tonight we decide how to use this knowledge. Dawn arrived with alarming news. Kichi was gone. His sleeping mat lay empty, his few possessions untouched. The young warrior assigned to night watch reported seeing nothing, though tracks revealed someone had left the village under cover of darkness. Perhaps he scouted ahead, Takota suggested as the tribal leaders gathered in Nakohi's lodge. He often acts without permission. Eleanor sat quietly among them, her new status as a recognized member of the tribe still feeling strange yet right. The previous night's council had confirmed her place among them after Elder Makia's pronouncement. Women had painted symbols of belonging on her arms, while warriors had acknowledged her with traditional gestures of respect. Now, as she listened to the discussion about Kichi's disappearance, a memory surfaced from her time in the wilderness, a glimpse of a familiar silhouette on the ridge above Blackwood's camp, too distant to identify with certainty. I may have seen Kichi during my trial, she said, her voice cutting through the debate. Near Blackwood's camp. I thought my eyes deceived me. Silence fell over the assembly. The implication was too terrible to voice aloud. Nakohi's expression hardened. For how long, I wonder? How many of our movements has he reported? How many of our weaknesses has he revealed? Takota reached for his bow. I will track him. No, Nakohi commanded. We must assume Blackwood now knows everything, including that we know of his plan. He turned to Eleanor. Did you see recognition in Blackwood's eyes when he spotted you? She nodded grimly. He looked directly at me before ordering his men to shoot. Then we have little time, Nakohi concluded. They will not wait until tomorrow to attack the settlers. They will come here first to silence us. The next hours passed in urgent preparation. Women packed essential belongings while warriors readied weapons. Children too young to understand the danger were told stories of a great adventure ahead. Eleanor worked alongside Kalinia, helping the elderly and children prepare to evacuate to a hidden canyon Nakohi had designated as a refuge. As she packed medicine bundles under Nantai's direction, a commotion outside drew her attention. A scout burst into the village, blood streaming from a wound on his arm. In his hand, he clutched a broken arrow, its shaft stained red. Riders coming, he gasped. Many. armed. Kichi leads them. The blood-stained arrow passed from hand to hand. The traditional Apache signal of betrayal confirmed what they had feared. Nakohi's voice rang out across the village. Evacuate now. Dakota, lead our people to the hidden canyon. Warriors to defensive positions. He turned to Eleanor. Go with the others. I'm staying, she replied without hesitation. This is not your fight. It became my fight when I chose your people as my own. She stood taller, meeting his gaze directly. Besides, I know Blackwood. I know how he thinks, how he fights. Something shifted in Nakohi's expression. Respect, but also something deeper that neither had time to acknowledge. Then help Nantai move the remaining medicine. When that is done, join me at the ridge. As Eleanor hurried to complete her task, the village transformed around her. Warriors took positions behind rocks and structures. Women who chose to remain armed themselves with bows and knives. Within an hour, the children, elderly, and many of the women had been evacuated, leaving behind a smaller force prepared to delay the attackers and protect the tribe's retreat. Eleanor joined Nakohi on the ridge overlooking the village's eastern approach. In the distance, dust clouds marked the approaching riders. How many? She asked. 20, perhaps more, he replied. Too many for direct confrontation. You have a plan? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Always. He pointed to key positions where warriors lay hidden. We will not defeat them here. We will slow them, confuse them, lead them away from our people's escape route. Eleanor nodded, understanding the strategy. Blackwood expects either direct confrontation or complete evacuation. He doesn't expect deception. He thinks like a soldier, Nakohi observed. We think like hunters. As the riders drew closer, Eleanor could make out Kichi riding alongside Blackwood, pointing out the village layout. The sight of the Apache warrior's betrayal made her stomach clench with anger and sadness. Nakohi must have sensed her thoughts. Kichi believes he protects our people by surrendering to the inevitable. He sees no path but submission to survive. There's always another path, Eleanor said softly. Nakohi's hand briefly covered hers. A gesture of solidarity and something more. Yes, we make it together now. He raised his arm, signaling the hidden warriors to prepare. When I give the sign, we retreat to the second position. Stay close to me. The riders approached the village perimeter, weapons drawn. Blackwood's voice carried on the morning air as he addressed Kichi. Remember our arrangement. Your people receive the northern reservation lands, undisturbed. All you need do is help us secure the woman and the chief. Eleanor's eyes met Nakohi's. In that moment, understanding passed between them. This was no longer about land or water rights. For Blackwood, this had become personal. The first shots shattered the morning stillness. Blackwood's men charged into the village, expecting resistance that wasn't there. Instead, they found a ghostly collection of dwellings, most already emptied of valuables and occupants. Where are they? Blackwood demanded, wheeling his horse in frustrated circles. Kichi's confusion was evident. They should be here. They had no time to fully evacuate. From their hidden position on the ridge, Eleanor and Nakohi watched the chaos unfold. The Apache warriors remained perfectly still, invisible among the rocks and brush. Now, Nakohi whispered. A single arrow flew from somewhere to Eleanor's right, striking the ground near Blackwood's horse. The animal reared in panic, nearly unseating its rider. Before the settlers could identify the source, 3 more arrows came from different directions. It's an ambush, one of the men shouted. Blackwood regained control of his mount. Spread out. Find them. As the attackers separated, Nakohi touched Eleanor's arm. To the next position. They retreated silently, moving to another outcropping that overlooked the western edge of the village. Other warriors did the same, creating the illusion of a much larger defensive force through coordinated movement and strategic shots. Blackwood is splitting his men, Eleanor observed. Just as you predicted. Nakohi nodded grimly. His mistake is thinking we fight for the village. We fight for time. The settlers' frustration mounted as they chased shadows. What had begun as an overwhelming force was now scattered across the landscape, pursuing fleeting targets that struck and disappeared. When several men approached their position, Nakohi gestured for Eleanor to follow him down a narrow game trail. They had nearly reached the next defensive point when a shout from behind announced their discovery. There! The chief and the woman! Gunfire erupted, bullets splintering rock near Eleanor's head. Nakohi pulled her behind a boulder as more shots followed. "Stay here," he commanded, notching an arrow to his bow. "There are too many," Eleanor protested. Nakohi's eyes met hers with fierce intensity. "Trust our plan." He loosed 3 arrows in rapid succession, forcing their pursuers to take cover. Meanwhile, attacks from other Apache warriors drew attention elsewhere, creating continued confusion among Blackwood's men. For nearly an hour, this deadly dance continued. The Apache fighters gradually retreated toward the canyon pass, away from the direction their people had actually fled, drawing Blackwood's forces deeper into unfamiliar territory. Eleanor stayed close to Nakohi, her knowledge of Blackwood's tactics proving invaluable. "He'll send men to circle behind us soon," she warned during a brief respite. "It's his standard maneuver." Nakohi immediately signaled to Dakota, who dispatched 2 warriors to counter the anticipated flanking movement. They had almost reached the canyon entrance when Eleanor spotted a familiar figure moving parallel to their position. Kitchi, tracking them with single-minded determination. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, and Eleanor saw something unexpected in his expression. Not hatred, but desperation. "Kitchi is following us," she told Nakohi. "Alone." Before Nakohi could respond, the thunder of hooves announced Blackwood's approach. He had gathered several of his men and was charging directly toward their position. "Inside the canyon," Nakohi ordered. "Now!" They darted between the narrow rock walls just as bullets ricocheted off stone around them. The canyon's tight confines would force their pursuers to dismount and follow on foot, another advantage in the Apache strategy. Eleanor ran alongside Nakohi until they reached a wider section where several warriors waited. This was their final stand, the place where they would either repel their attackers or be cornered. Blackwood and 4 men entered the canyon on foot, rifles ready. They advanced cautiously, aware of the danger but driven by Blackwood's obsessive determination. "I know you're here, Eleanor," Blackwood called, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "This foolish game ends now." The Apache warriors held their positions, arrows nocked but not yet released. Nakohi had given strict orders: wait for the perfect moment when all pursuers were committed to the trap. A movement caught Eleanor's eye. Kitchi, silently scaling the canyon wall to a position above them, a knife gleaming in his hand. His target was clearly Nakohi, whose attention was fixed on Blackwood below. Without thinking, Eleanor lunged forward, snatching up Nakohi's shield from where it rested against a rock. She raised it just as Kitchi leapt, his blade striking the hardened hide instead of Nakohi's back. The commotion alerted everyone. Nakohi spun around as Kitchi crashed into Eleanor, sending them both tumbling. The traitor's knife slashed downward, missing her throat by inches. Blackwood, seeing the struggle, raised his rifle. "Hold your fire. Don't hit the woman." This moment of distraction was all the Apache warriors needed. Arrows flew from multiple positions, forcing Blackwood and his men to dive for cover. Eleanor struggled with Kitchi, her smaller frame at a disadvantage against his warrior's strength. As his knife inched toward her heart, a shadow fell across them. Nakohi delivered a powerful strike that sent Kitchi rolling away. Blackwood, seeing his opportunity, took careful aim at Nakohi's exposed back. "Behind you!" Eleanor screamed. Nakohi dropped instantly as the shot rang out. The bullet grazed his shoulder instead of finding his heart. In that moment, war cries echoed through the canyon. Not from Nakohi's small band, but from dozens of fresh Apache warriors pouring in from the canyon's other entrance. The allied band from the neighboring territory had arrived, responding to Nakohi's request for aid sent days earlier. Blackwood's expression transformed from triumphant to horrified as he realized his force was now hopelessly outnumbered. Nantai's healing lodge had been transformed into a battlefield infirmary. The wounded from both sides lay on reed mats while the old medicine woman moved between them, her weathered hands applying poultices and bandages with equal care to friend and foe alike. Eleanor knelt beside Nakohi, who lay on a raised platform of woven branches. The bullet had carved a deep furrow across his shoulder rather than lodging in his flesh. Painful but not life-threatening if infection could be prevented. "You should rest," he told her, his voice stronger than his pallor suggested. "As should you," she replied, gently applying a mixture of herbs Nantai had prepared. The scent of sage and juniper filled the small space between them. The battle had ended swiftly once the allied Apache band arrived. Blackwood and his men, surrounded and outnumbered, had surrendered. They now sat under guard in the center of the reclaimed village, their futures uncertain. Kichi had not been so fortunate. After his failed attempt on Nakohi's life, he had tried to escape up the canyon wall. An arrow from Takota's bow had found him mid-climb. His body would be returned to the earth according to Apache tradition, despite his betrayal. "He believed he was saving our people," Nakohi said suddenly, as if reading Eleanor's thoughts. "Fear can twist even a warrior's heart." Eleanor's hands paused in their work. "Yet you never gave in to that fear. I had something to fight for." His dark eyes held hers for a moment before he looked away, the admission hovering between them unelaborated. Outside, voices rose as a delegation approached the lodge. Elder Makya entered, followed by two unfamiliar men in cavalry uniforms. Eleanor recognized the insignia of a captain on the taller man's shoulder. "Chief Nakohi," the officer said, removing his hat. "I am Captain James Rogers, 7th Cavalry. This is Lieutenant Wilson. We've come in response to reports of trouble." Nakohi struggled to sit upright. Eleanor supported him with a gentle hand on his uninjured side. "You are timely, Captain," Nakohi replied with dignity despite his condition. "Your prisoners await outside." The captain looked uncomfortable. "I've spoken with this man Blackwood. His story is concerning. You believe him over us?" Nakohi's voice remained calm, though Eleanor felt him tense beneath her touch. "On the contrary," Rogers replied. His confession, once he realized his position, was quite illuminating. "Lieutenant Wilson here has been investigating land fraud in the territory for months." The lieutenant stepped forward. Blackwood admitted to forging documents, bribing officials, and planning false attacks to justify military action against your people. He was working with several territorial officials to claim valuable mining rights. Eleanor felt a wave of vindication wash over her. "He told you this willingly?" "Not at first," Rogers admitted. "But when faced with the evidence, including the map you recovered, Miss Bennett, and the testimony of his own men who didn't fancy hanging for massacre, he became remarkably forthcoming." In the days that followed, a strange peace settled over the village. The cavalry established a temporary camp nearby, taking statements and gathering evidence for the territorial court. Blackwood and his closest conspirators were kept under guard, while the lesser participants in his scheme were released after providing testimony. Eleanor divided her time between helping Nantai with the wounded and sitting with Nakohi as he recovered. During those quiet hours, they spoke of many things: her life in Boston, his responsibilities as chief, the uncertain future that lay before them both. One evening, as sunset painted the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple, Nantai presented them with matching armbands of intricately beaded leather. "For protection during healing," she explained, securing one around Nakohi's arm above his wound. She tied the second around Eleanor's wrist where Kichi's knife had left a shallow cut. For both kinds of wounds, those of the flesh and those of the spirit. The old woman's knowing gaze moved between them. Some healings happened together or not at all. Later, as Eleanor walked alone by the river where she and Nakohi had first met, Captain Rogers sought her out. "I've received word from the territorial governor," he said without preamble. "He's sending a judge to investigate the entire affair. Blackwood's connections run deep, but his confession has implicated several officials in fraud." Eleanor considered this news. "Will it be enough to protect the Apache lands?" That's partly why I'm here, Rogers replied. Your testimony would carry significant weight, Miss Bennett. As a Boston society woman with connections to the East, your account of these events would be compelling. You mean as a white woman, I'd be believed where the Apache would not. Rogers had the decency to look discomfort. I mean that justice sometimes requires strategic voices. Your unique position between both worlds gives your words power. Eleanor gazed toward the village where lanterns now flickered in the gathering dusk. Somewhere among those lights, Nakohe was likely sitting in council with the elders, planning for their people's future. Their people. The thought no longer felt strange to her. I'll testify, she told Rogers, but not as Eleanor Bennett of Boston. She touched the armband Nantai had given her. I'll speak as a woman of the Apache, who has seen the truth with her own eyes. 3 months after the battle, the Apache village buzzed with preparation for a ceremony unlike any in living memory. Women arranged food around a central fire pit while men constructed a special lodge of juniper branches and deer hides. Children darted between busy adults, excitement making them nearly impossible to corral. Eleanor stood in Nantai's lodge as the old woman applied ceremonial paint to her face. White clay for purity, ochre for courage, charcoal for strength. Her clothing, a masterwork of Kalinia's skilled hands, combined traditional Apache design with subtle elements from Eleanor's Eastern heritage, beadwork patterns that echoed the embroidery of a Boston society dress. Nervous? Nantai asked, her eyes twinkling with rare amusement. Terrified, Eleanor admitted. The past months had brought monumental changes. The territorial judge had arrived as promised, conducting hearings where Eleanor's testimony proved decisive. Blackwood and 3 corrupt officials now awaited trial in the territorial capital. The governor, eager to distance himself from the scandal, had signed a decree protecting Apache lands from development for 10 years. A temporary victory, but significant nonetheless. More surprisingly, several settler families had approached Nakohe about establishing respectful trading relationships. Eleanor had served as interpreter, bridging cultural gaps with her unique perspective. The seeds of understanding, while fragile, had been planted. It is time, Nantai announced, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Outside, the tribe had gathered in a circle around the central fire. Eleanor emerged from the lodge to a momentary hush, followed by appreciative murmurs. Across the circle stood Nakohe, magnificent in his ceremonial attire, his dark eyes finding hers instantly across the distance. Elder Makia began the ceremony, his ancient voice carrying surprising strength. Today we witness what has not been seen in 4 generations, the full adoption of one not born to us. He gestured for Eleanor to approach the fire. Nakohe did the same from the opposite side. This woman has proven herself through trial, through battle, through loyalty, Makia continued. The ancestors have accepted her. Now we make it known to all people that she walks among us as NDE, the people. Dakota stepped forward, bearing a blanket woven with both Apache patterns and designs that Eleanor recognized from her mother's New England quilts. Nantai had secretly requested a description of these patterns weeks earlier. As the ceremonial blanket was wrapped around both Eleanor and Nakohe, binding them temporarily together, the old healer spoke the traditional words of blessing. Then Nakohe surprised everyone by adding his own words in clear English for all to understand. 2 rivers can join to make one stronger current, he said, his voice carrying to the farthest members of the circle. 2 paths can merge to create a better way. 2 people from different worlds can show us all a new direction. His eyes never left Eleanor's as he continued. This woman walked away from her world to find truth. I walked the boundaries of mind-seeking wisdom. Together, we found something neither expected. A lump formed in Eleanor's throat as she recognized the depth of what was happening. This was not merely her adoption ceremony. It was something more. If she is willing, Nakohe said, I ask Eleanor of the NDE to join her path with mine, not just as a member of our tribe, but as my wife. The proposal, unexpected in the middle of the adoption ceremony, caused a ripple of surprise through the gathering. Such unions were rare but not unprecedented in tribal history. Eleanor found her voice, speaking first in halting Apache and then in English. I left Boston seeking escape. I found purpose instead. I ran from a marriage of convenience and found one of the heart. She took a breath, feeling the rightness of her next words. Yes, I will join my path with yours, as wife, as partner, as bridge between worlds. The celebration lasted well into the night. Captain Rogers and Lieutenant Wilson, invited as honored guests, spoke of their hopes for peace in the territory. Settler families who had begun trading with the tribe shared food and cautious conversation. Children from both communities played together, unconcerned with the historical divisions of their elders. As the stars emerged overhead, Eleanor and Nakohi slipped away to the river where their story had begun. The same waters that had carried her tears months ago now reflected the light of a full moon and two people standing at the threshold of an unexpected future. Will it be enough? Eleanor asked, thinking of the temporary land protections, the fragile peace, the enormous challenges ahead. Nakohi took her hand, his touch now familiar and essential. It is a beginning, he said, and beginnings contain all possibility. He gestured toward the river flowing steadily before them. Water does not fight the mountain, finds its path around, through, beneath, patient, persistent. Eventually, even mountains give way. Eleanor smiled, understanding the wisdom in his words. Their path would not be easy, but they would face it as water faces stone, with persistence, adaptability, and the quiet confidence that time and truth were on their side. Together, she said simply. Together, he agreed, as the river continued its ancient journey through a land that had witnessed countless endings and beginnings, yet never one quite like this.